Good morning. My name is Dee Dee Camhi, and I'll be leading today's service. Reverend Matt Alspaugh will be presenting our message this morning. Our opening words this morning are by Marianne Hatchin Coulter. Welcome to this place of possibility. This is this is love's hearth, the home of hope, a refuge for minds in search of truth, unfolding, ever beautiful, ever strange. Here, compassion is our shelter, freedom our protection from the storms of bigotry and hate. In this abode, may we find comfort and courage. Here, may our sight become vision to see the unseen, to glimpse the good that is yet to come. And so, I want to welcome you with live from Fellowship Hall. It's our LCUUF Sunday service. Our announcements were on a slide showed before the service. If you didn't see them, don't worry, they'll be sent by email in the next day or two. And I just realized that a lot of them are going to spam. So if you don't see them, make sure you check your spam folder. Many people have said that the announcements are ending. Oh, I'm sorry. It's right there. So our building is open to all fully vaccinated participants. We continue to offer our service on Zoom, even as we welcome people to the building. We ask people to continue to wear their masks in the building to help prevent the spread of COVID breakthrough infections. And a special announcement from Matt.
I just wanted to note that while our pledge drive ended in mid-December, we've had a few more pledges since then. And as of the turn of the year, we've had a total of 920,100 pesos in pledges. This is... Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is significantly over our goal of 750,000 pesos. We've basically blown the top off of our thermometer graphic. It's a wonderful thing. So first, I want to thank all of you who pledge or otherwise contribute to support our fellowship. And second, I want to acknowledge that by pledging, you are putting your faith and trust in the leadership of this fellowship. Faith that the leadership will use your money responsibly, and trust that our values, as expressed in our budget, are aligned with the values, your values, and the values of Unitarian Universalism in general. And about that budget, we have a meeting next week after the service to discuss our budget for the coming year. Our treasurer, Lorna Dean, who's raising her hand, will lead it, and all are welcome. And back to you.
And now a special welcome to our visitors. If you're visiting with us for the first time or have returned or reconnected with us after a long absence, we invite you to say your name and tell us where you're from. If you're on Zoom, use the Zoom raise hand feature or just turn your video on, wave your hand, and we'll ask you to unmute. If you're in the room, just raise your hand. So do we have any?
If you don't mind, yeah.
Hello, I'm June Wilson. This is my first time here, my first time at a UU service. So I have for years come to Ahahik, but now I'm living here as of last March, so almost a year. So thank you for welcoming me.
Fantastic, welcome. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Johannes Bjorner, and here's my lovely wife, Susanne. We are back here after 2 years of not being able to enjoy this place.
Oh, excellent. Welcome.
My name's Dave, and I am from D.C., where I'm active in All Souls Unitarian Church.
Welcome.
Anybody else?
Oh, another, yes. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Tom Payne. I'm originally from Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, where I was born as a Unitarian. But I haven't been to a Unitarian church in 30 years because of various postings around the world. I'm now retired here, and I look forward to becoming a member.
Okay, anybody else here? All right, now let's switch to those on Zoom. Is there anyone new with us on Zoom?
Not
No?
seeing any hands. Not seeing any hands, sorry.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's go on to lighting the chalice. Our chalice lighting words today are by Reverend Peter Zamochi. He's a minister in the Religious Society of the Czech Unitarians. And in English, I'll read and then I'll tell you, speak it in Spanish. May this flame go up and remind us that our faith is good. Every one of us can bring love to the world. May this chalice burn with a clear flame as a symbol of our path. Every one of us can have joy, peace, and harmony in our hearts. May through this flame the wisdom of ages speak to us and stay in us. Every one of us can be a blessing to the world. Y en español, que esta llama se eleva y nos recuerda que nuestra fe es buena. Cada uno de nosotros puede traer amor al mundo. Que la clara llama de esta cáliz arda como símbolo de nuestro camino. Cada uno de nosotros puede tener alegría, paz y armonía en nuestros corazones. Que la sabiduría de todos los tiempos nos hable a través de su llama y permanezca en nosotros. Cada uno de nosotros puede ser una bendición para este mundo. Now let's light our chalice with these words that we sing together. We kindle this light in celebration for the life that we share. Our opening hymn is All People That on Earth Do Dwell. The tune of this hymn will probably sound familiar to you. It's called Old 100th because it was written for a variation on the 100th Psalm. It's been recast by UU songwriter Alicia Carpenter. So you in the room, please rise if you wish and join us in singing. All people that on earth do dwell, sing ye aloud with cheerful voice. So each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community that cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat box and we'll read those aloud. But first, let's voice our sorrows or concerns, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. You're welcome to type sorrows and concerns in the chat box, and first we'll start with the folks in the room to give the people on Zoom a little time to type. So are there any sorrows or concerns that people would like to share here in the room?
Sorrow and concern for those refugees, displaced people, stranded wherever they may be in the world.
My name is Sue Kelly. I have a sorrow for all the people in Colorado who lost everything.
And this is Matt, and I will note a sorrow that Frank Howell died this week after a long battle with cancer.
I think there's some seats on this side over
Oh, yeah,
there.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any sorrows to be shared on Zoom?
Yes, Dee Dee. From Kathy Coaches, she says, my son Brian and his girlfriend Bobby both have COVID.
Oh,
They are both fully vaccinated, so are not hospitalized, but they're pretty sick. Please keep them in your thoughts. We also have a sorrow from Hannah Frederick, who says, I'm sorry for the new variant. Can't travel to see my family. And from me, Colleen Beery, I have a concern that my great niece Ava seems to have COVID. She's only 5.
oh,
Thank you.
okay, any other sorrows?
Nope, that's it on
Okay,
Zoom.
so now let's recall the joys, whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourself or others. You're welcome to type joys into this chat box, and again, we'll start with the folks in the room. Are there any joys that people would like to share here in the room?
I'm Richard Clark, and I want to share a joy for being here today with an overflow crowd. And I want to share the joy that I feel like has brought so much in my life, and I want to thank all of you for that.
Thank you, Richard.
I have 2. One may seem like a strange joy, but my daughter-in-law and my 9-year-old grandson back in New Hampshire both tested positive for COVID, which seems like a sorrow, but they had just stuffy nose and sore throat,
Yeah.
and they're fine now. So it's a joy that they came through it 100% fine. My other joy is also a strange one. I was reminded this past, 2 days ago, I guess, that I did a collage a long time ago. And it's come to me and it stays with me every moment now, which is the goddess meant for me a life of joy. So
Wow.
I offer that to the rest of you.
Okay. Let me see.
Tom McClure. I want to share a joy and happiness for those countries, those communities, and those families that have welcomed displaced people and refugees, wherever they may be.
Thank you, Tom.
Good morning, I'm David, and I'm moving slow this morning. I have a sorrow that regards my stepdaughter and step-granddaughter back in Arizona who are also suffering with COVID.
Oh, jeez. Are there any more joys or sorrows in the room? Okay, how about joys to be shared on Zoom?
Yes, Dee Dee, we have a number from Heidi McLennan. She says, I have joy. It was the best holiday season that I've had in many years. I'm so grateful for my daughter and my beautiful friends. From Dave and Susan Miller, their joy is that everyone in their house had COVID tests and they're all negative. We have a joy from Trudy and Lou Crippen, who say, joy that Twitter has permanently suspended a congresswoman who used Twitter to spread lies about COVID.
Oh, good.
And Hannah has a joy. Hannah Frederick says, I am happy that I have new friends and Ahihik is still rather healthy to get together outside in a small number. From Joni Ward, she has the joy that a full house there at the fellowship. Her nephew, John, had a wonderful visit and will return soon. She also had a great visit with her son after 3 years away and is looking forward to more. And my joy, Colleen Beery, is that this is my first time at the lake Thanksgiving through New Year's. And even though there's lots of coetes and noise and music, the weather is beautiful. So I'm very grateful to be here. I think that's all.
Okay. And this candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. So many of us have burdens, anger, fear, and frustration, all of those things that weigh heavy on our hearts. We light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows.
There are 5 members of this congregation who died in 2021. On this, the first Sunday of the new year, we take a few moments now to remember them. We're trying something new in the back, and I think it's not going to work today. I think we just skip it on, and I'll read the names, and we'll light the candles here. And yeah, you can go back and forth between those two, and that'll work just fine. We're gonna widen the shot. Why don't you take Cam? That'll do. Okay. And so 2 candles are already lit. That's kind of weird. Oh, we got ahead of ourselves. Okay. Pop back to the names, and we'll go one at a time with the names. So Monica Devine, who died in July. And Howard Frederick, who died in August. Esther Jones, who died in October. Yes, I know, they were inexpensive candles. Bob McCowan, who died in December. and Frank Howell, who died in December just this last week. And our responsive reading is from the Jewish tradition, written by Rabbi Roland B. Gittleson. It has been slightly adapted, and I'm just taking over. I'll read the Roman type, and I invite you to read the italic type. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
Blueness of the sky and the warmth of summer, we remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us as we remember them. And so let me invite all of us into a time of meditation, a time of quiet, a time to settle our minds and our bodies and our spirits. One of the things that can be a challenge to those of us who meditate is the distraction of sounds around us. And especially here in Mexico, there are lots of sounds. That can be a hindrance, but it also can be helpful to our practice. We can actually use sounds as an object of meditation, as something to focus on. So I invite you to settle into your chair, find a comfortable position. Just close your eyes or soften your vision, maybe on the floor or something, and just relax. And what you might do is to listen for the sounds that are around us. Some people find it helpful to kind of scan from left to right, listening to the sounds from the left and then around to the sounds on the right. Kind of creating a sound horizon in front of you. Now, it may also be useful to not try to identify the sounds that come along. Just notice them, as if you were hearing them for the very first time. And if thoughts arise, simply return to the sounds. And let us return now to this place of possibility to be together once again.
This reading is by poet and environmental activist William Stanley Merwin. With what stillness at last you appear in the valley, your first sunlight reaching down to touch the lips of a few high leaves that do not stir, as though they had not noticed and did not know you at all. Then the voice of a dove calls from far away in itself to the hush of the morning. So this is the sound of you, here and now, whether or not anyone hears it. This is where we have come with our age, our knowledge such as it is, and our hopes such as they are, invisible before us, untouched and still possible.
It's the day after New Year's Day, and my New Year's resolutions are already in the trash. Well, that's not true, because I didn't make any. I lost faith in New Year's resolutions years ago, and I haven't made any for a long time. I bet this might be true of many of you. We've learned that few of us can really keep resolutions. They seem to run in the same repeatable tracks: lose weight, exercise more, manage the money better. And all these things are hard, and they fall by the wayside. So why bother making these kind of goals? The Washington Post recently had an article titled, "Is it time to stop using your fitness tracker?" In the article, people commented that the trackers turned what used to be pleasurable activities, walking, running, into chores. People felt judged by some piece of plastic. For some, the goals demotivated them. One woman said, "If I can't meet my 10,000 steps number, why bother trying?" And for others, the fitness goals pushed them to ignore their bodies and exercise too hard, perhaps beyond their body's limits. People chased the goal without paying attention to the underlying benefit. This is a problem with goals. Some years ago, I worked in sales support in a high-tech startup business. I got to see up close and personal what the sales biz looked like. How these salespeople were so focused on their goals, oftentimes at the expense of larger benefits like, say, the long-term relationships with their customers. And how competitive these salespeople were, and how thick-skinned they had to be, for they were often berated and shamed at sales meetings for failing to make their numbers. I knew I'd never cut it as a salesman. I also realized that being the best is not always the best thing. Here's an example. Many people have bucket lists, those lists of things that they want to do, the places they want to see before they, as they say, kick the bucket. On most of those lists are the iconic #1 destinations, the best in the world. And in my travels, I've realized that those destinations are typically the most crowded and expensive, the ones with the most pickpockets. I've realized that I'm much better served going to the #2 or maybe the #3 spot. Okay, maybe it's not quite as Instagrammable or braggable, but usually it's far more real, relaxed, and enjoyable than those #1 spots. But it's easy to get hung up on the best. My salesman friends used to say, if you're not the lead dog on the dog sled, the view is always the same. Another dog's asshole. To which I would answer now, well, who's really in charge? Not the dog in front, but the human in the back riding on the sled. So I've been leery of goals, or rather more pointedly, of cultures that are focused on goals, on winning, on somehow being better than everyone else. And this is a tricky thing for me to say because I've encouraged our board of directors to set board goals and to review them periodically. So it's not just about having goals, but perhaps more about how we use goals. And the same is true with New Year's resolutions. So I wonder if there's a way to cast out future ideas, visions, but with a lighter touch than that goal-oriented culture. Now, I don't mean just wishing for a better future. We call that hope, and hope can be a little passive at times. But maybe we could use the word possibility. To borrow from Margaret Wheatley in a favorite poem that I love, she says, "Ask what's possible, not what's wrong." So maybe instead of goals, we might talk of possibilities. We might talk about how we invite the desirable possibilities, the things we want to have happen in our lives. In certain yoga practices, we begin with a Sankalpa mudra, where we set an intention. The idea is to internalize this intention, to let it settle into our subconscious, or rather do that than to, for example, write it into our day planner or post it in a sticky note on our bathroom mirror. The idea is that such subconscious intentions are more likely to become realized than, for example, resolutions. Intentions are desired possibilities. Intentions are those possibilities that we want to happen. Now, possibility is, but now you might be thinking, well, not all possibilities are good ones. And you'd be right. Let's consider all the possibilities, both positive and negative, that have emerged from this pandemic. Sociologist Nicholas Christakis of Yale University takes a fairly high-level view of this pandemic, basing his analysis on history of past pandemics. And here are his thoughts on pandemic possibilities.
Well, so with Omicron on the rise, what might next year have in store? Nicholas Christakis is the director of the Human Nature Lab at Yale University and author of Apollo's Arrow. He's been talking to Hari Srinivasan about what's to come.
Bianna, thanks. Nicholas Christakis, thanks so much for joining us. And I got to ask, you have been in conversation with us a couple of times now. Your predictions have been fairly spot on. In your book, you talk about 3 different phases of a pandemic. And I want to know, like everyone else, which phase are we in now? And when are we going to get to that next one?
I think that it's safe to say, while we are not, unfortunately, at the beginning of the end of this respiratory pandemic, we are thankfully approaching the end of the beginning. And respiratory pandemics typically go through 3 phases. There's the immediate phase, which I had thought, and it's proving to be the case, in the case of the coronavirus pandemic, would last into 2022. There's the intermediate phase, which I think is going to last a couple of years into 2024. And then there's the post-pandemic phase. During the immediate phase, we're feeling the full biological and epidemiological force of the virus. It's like a wave of the virus that's sweeping through the human population. And the virus will spread and spread and spread among us until it becomes endemic, until we reach actually herd immunity. Basically, unless you're a hermit in the mountains or you're incredibly lucky, everyone in the United States, in fact, everyone on the planet, is either going to be vaccinated for this condition or infected with the virus. And we're going to have to wait until that happens. That's going to happen sometime in 2022 in this country, in the beginning of 2022. And then we will finally put the biological and epidemiological impact of the virus behind us and enter the intermediate phase. And during the intermediate phase, we're going to have to cope with the clinical, psychological, social, and economic aftershocks of the virus. It's like a tsunami has washed ashore and has devastated the countryside. Finally, the waters recede, which is great, but now we have to clean up the mess. And as a nation, we're going to have to deal with lots of fallout from the virus. And then finally, in around 2024, and these are approximate dates, we'll enter the post-pandemic phase, which I think is going to be a little bit of a party. People will be very relieved to finally have put the pandemic behind us.
So we're perhaps at the end of the beginning rather than at the beginning of the end. Christakis casts the possibility that we are just in the first phase of the pandemic, with the following phases at least looking more promising. Cleanup after the tsunami, yes, but perhaps a party after. Another possibility is that we have moved from a pandemic into an endemic. That is to say, that the virus will always be with us, but that it is mutating, evolving, becoming more contagious, yes, but also less deadly. I understand that this is the path that the 1918 flu virus has taken, becoming the H1N1 variant, which contributes to seasonal flu outbreaks to this day. I'm not sure which of these possibilities, or perhaps some other, will ultimately play out. As the old Danish proverb says, which has been misattributed to many, it is difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. I think one of the things that has frustrated, even angered many people about the pandemic is that we have not been given hard and fast guidance about what is happening and how to live with the virus. People want simple black and white answers. Yet the pandemic has reminded us that we live in a world of varying shades of gray, or perhaps even of different colors and hues, far more complicated and uncertain. Or maybe one could say far more possible. We've learned that vaccines are not 100% effective, or rather, we've had to unlearn our childhood teaching that you simply take the shot and avoid the disease. We've received differing guidance on how long we have to quarantine when we get a positive test. Is it 2 weeks, or 1 week, or 5 days? And we've watched the on again, off again patterns of restrictions as different regions try to control the outbreak, and we are befuddled that some places seem lightly touched by a variant of the virus, while others get hammered, no matter what they do. So if you are one of those persons who wants a simple, rule-following world, this virus has upended everything. No wonder you are angry. No wonder you want to throw it all out and blame the clueless scientists and the clueless government officials and the clueless healthcare providers. This is not the world you signed up for to live in, and somebody's got to bear the blame. Well, welcome to the world of possibility, even if it's not the possible world you had imagined. And yet, welcome to the new year. For this is where we have come, with our hopes untouched and still possible.
This reading is by the Irish poet and priest John O'Donoghue. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming. Excuse me. This thought has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time it has been watching your desire, feeling the emptiness grow inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you have outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil raise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and you stepped out onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination isn't clear, You can trust the promise of this new opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventures. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you.
A friend in ministry, Reverend Scott Taylor, likes to call us the religion of why not. He says, possibility is arguably most central to our faith. It has distinguished Unitarian Universalists from the start. Whereas others saw depravity and sin at the core of human identity, we saw potential, sometimes with hardly any boundaries. When many were preaching that this world was fallen and that we should instead look to the hope of an afterlife, we found ourselves falling in love with the possibility of heaven on earth. Theologically, you might say that we were the people that believed that God hadn't given up on any of us, and so we shouldn't give up on life. I often like to think of us as the religion of why not. End quote. So why not? The realm of why not opens us to an expansive form of religion, seemingly boundless, full of possibility. This is what attracted me to Unitarian Universalism in the first place, and I suspect some of you were drawn to it by a similar appeal. I've talked to many people whose faith journeys have had many steps, maybe from Christianity to Buddhism to paganism to Unitarian Universalism, as one person described her journey to me. Others may have had more steps or fewer. But here's the thing. Many of us arrived at Unitarian Universalism because it did not demand that we fully terminate our journey. It did not demand that we reject the wisdom that we may have gained from previous parts of our journeys. And as Unitarian Universalists, we could continue exploring the possibilities of faith, including other faiths, and that was okay. And even if some ultimately left Unitarian Universalism, that's okay too. We who remained are just happy for them that this faith could have been a way station on their journeys. So how did we become a religion, such a religion of possibility? Early in the history of American Unitarianism, thinkers such as Ralph Waldo Emerson, Elizabeth Peabody, and Henry David Thoreau were reading Buddhist and Taoist texts, often in poor translations, but they were weaving these ideas into their own writings. Thus, much of Unitarian transcendentalist thought draws from Eastern religious thought. And why not? And then much later on, a leading Universalist minister, Kenneth Patton, asked, is Universalism a Christian denomination, or is it something more, a truly universal religion? Kenneth Patton and others began exploring what they called naturalistic humanism and sought, and I quote, to redefine the meaning of the word universalism by bringing the arts of all religions and cultures into what he called a religion for one world, end quote. And when the Unitarians and the Universalists merged in the early 1960s, this idea of a universal religion remained part of the combined Unitarian Universalist movement. It was one of the aspects that I found appealing when I discovered Unitarian Universalism in 1987. At that time, I encountered Unitarian Universalists exploring Buddhism, Hinduism, paganism, Judaism, Sufi Islam, and New Age practices, among other things. And again, why not? There was this feeling of openness, expansiveness, possibility in our movement, a feeling that we could combine the best aspects of various religions of the world, even finding underlying foundational qualities of the best of them. Values like goodness and dignity, interrelatedness, and love. For someone new to this faith, this was heady stuff, full of possibility. It opened a rich future, a world of possibility. Now, I do think that things have shifted in Unitarian Universalism in the last few decades. Religious postmodernism has suggested that there is no center when it comes to religious belief, that one cannot identify some core set of religious values shared by most people. Further, the practice of borrowing from, learning from other religious traditions, whether we're talking of practices, ideas, or traditions, has come to be seen as misappropriation, even a form of colonialism, and must be avoided. For some postmoderns, even being in dialogue with other religious groups is suspicious. Instead, we should focus primarily on those historical and theological aspects of our own tradition, and even question some of those. Now, I agree that some of our earlier dreams of some grand unified theory of religion, that's my phrase for it, may have gone too far. It's certainly good to reconnect with our roots. But I think we've lost something by becoming more insular and by becoming more disconnected from the variety of world religions. Unitarian Universalism remains a dynamic faith, one that I hope rediscovers the possibilities that emerge from engaging with other faith traditions. I hope that we might once again live into being the expansive, open, boundless religion of why not. Perhaps the poet John O'Donohue is speaking to Unitarian Universalism when he says, "In the out-of-way places of our hearts, where your thoughts never think to wander, the beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge." So, maybe with our courage kindled, you, Unitarian Universalism, will awaken your spirit to adventure, holding nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. May it be so. Blessed be. And our closing hymn, which is "We Would Be One." Another colleague, Reverend Kimberly DeBoot, who wrote about each hymn in our hymnal on her blog, says about this one, "If this spiritual practice has taught me anything, it's that we are an aspirational faith." And she goes on saying, this hymn not only talks of joining together in love, but it gives us the next 10 words, namely that, quoting, "We pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice." To which I would say, what a grand possibility. So you in the room, please rise as you wish and join us in singing.
To
This is the time in our service when we ask that you remember that we share our gifts here through pledging and donations. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on the slide during the announcement before the service every week. For the people here at the fellowship, we'll pass a basket. And while you're considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month, LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more to an organization in our lakeside community. We share one of the offering collected at the fellowship each week with that organization. For the month of January, we will be supporting Tepua Centro Comunitario, which serves some of the poorest barrios in Chapala. If you're not attending the fellowship in person, please donate to share the basket when you pay your pledge. Donate to share the basket separately or indicate what part of your donation is for share the basket. The offering will now be given and received. And that was... Okay, so let us extinguish our chalice with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world. As we let go of the year that has just passed, we remember those who are no longer with us. Let us turn to look forward into this new year to come, a year full of hope, still untouched and still possible, a year awakening to what we might offer to ourselves, our faith, and the world. For why not?
Beyond the rainbow, why